Hey, I'm down in London for another musically and culturally enriching trip. I'm down here principally for the Proms, but it's going to be an action-packed weekend and I'm going to squeeze in, amongst other things, an Arsenal versus Borussia Dortmund football match, a friendly game at the Emirates Stadium. I hope to check out another composer blue plaque, this time Hector Berlioz. And I'm going to do a bit of sightseeing around London, checking out some obvious things that I still haven't gotten around to seeing up to this point in my life. And also one or two maybe slightly more unusual sights of London that can fly under the radar a little bit. So join me as we discover London during the 2026 Prom series. As you'll see from the weather forecast for Sunday and Monday, we're still not out of the heat wave in the UK, which is going to make it quite pleasant to be wandering around London, but maybe not so pleasant to be travelling on the underground. We'll see. Before we head over to the Prom though, we're going to check out another blue plaque in London honouring a great composer, this time Hector Berlioz, and it's located at 58 Queen Anne Street, Marylebone. And on the plaque is the inscription Hector Berlioz 1803 to 1869, composer, stayed here in 1851.
I want something like this means such a moment.
So let's talk a little bit about the life of Louis Hector Berlioz. He was a pioneering French romantic composer, conductor and music critic, famous for revolutionizing orchestration and creating massive expressive works like the Symphonie Fantastique. He abandoned medicine against his father's wishes to study at the Paris Conservatoire and went on to become a giant of 19th century classical music. He was born on December the 11th, 1803 in La Côte Saint-André in France, and his father was a doctor who sent him to Paris for medical school. But after being disgusted by the anatomy dissecting room, he quit medicine. He obviously wasn't cut out for that. Instead, he was cut out for a life in music. So he entered the Paris Conservatoire and won the prestigious Prix de Rome in 1830. His musical style and career could be described as follows. He mastered large-scale orchestration, writing the influential treatise on instrumentation. He championed program music using recurring themes or the idée fixe to tell stories. But he also worked extensively as a respected music journalist and critic, and often commanded massive musical forces, sometimes conducting over 1,000 performers. He had a famous turbulent obsession with Irish actress Harriet Smithson, whom he later married and divorced. He suffered from poor health and deep personal grief later in life and died in Paris on March the 8th, 1869. What about his time in London? In 1851, Berlioz made the second of 5 trips to London, lodging in an apartment above the new Beethoven Rooms at 58, formerly 27, Queen Anne Street, an 18th century house altered around 1840 to 1850, where the Beethoven Quartet Society held its meetings from 1845. Rather than conducting his own works, Berlioz was entrusted with the stupid job of examining the musical instruments sent to the Great Exhibition. So this was the Great Exhibition of London. Early each morning he walked across Hyde Park to the Crystal Palace at South Kensington. He found the task painful. It splits your head to hear these hundreds of wretched machines, each more out of tune than the next. There were some compensations, however. On some evenings he listened to the concerts held in the drawing room below his room at number 58. He described one such occasion in a letter home. I could easily hear the whole performance by simply opening my door. One evening I heard Beethoven's trio in C minor being played. I opened my door wide. Come in, welcome, proud melody, how fine and beautiful it is. On another occasion that summer, Berlioz attended a charity concert at St Paul's Cathedral where there was a chorus of 6,500 children. He was deeply moved by the experience and subsequently added a part for children's voices in his composition for the hymn Te Deum. Berlioz returned to London in 1852, 1853 and for the final time in 1855, conducting a series of performances of his works. This information was taken principally from the English Heritage website. What about his works for violin? Well, there's no Violin Concerto that I'm aware of. No, I don't think there is one. But there is the Symphonie Fantastique of 1830, Harold in Italy of 1834, written for viola and commissioned by Paganini, which we'll come back to, and Romeo and Juliet of 1839, and the Grande Symphonie Funèbre et Triomphale of 1840. Other major works include the Grande Messe des Morts or Requiem of 1837 and Les Troyens, the Trojans, composed around 1856 to 1858. So, Harold in Italy, as violinists and violists, this is a piece that fascinates us. It's a symphony with viola obbligato, so not strictly speaking a concerto, and is a 4-movement orchestral work by Berlioz, his Opus 16, H68, written in 1834. Throughout, the unusual viola part represents the titular protagonist without casting the form as a concerto. The movements have these titles alluding to a programme: Harold in the Mountains, March of the Pilgrims, Serenade of an Abruzzo Mountaineer, and Orgy of Bandits. It was the Italian composer and virtuoso Niccolo Paganini who had encouraged Hector Berlioz to write Harold in Italy. The two first met after a concert of Berlioz's works conducted by Narcisse Girard on the 22nd of December 1833, 3 years after the premiere of Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. According to Berlioz's memoirs, Paganini had acquired a superb viola, a Stradivarius, the so-called Paganini Mendelssohn. But Paganini complained that he did not have suitable music. Would you like to write a solo for viola? You're the only one I can trust for this task. I find this fascinating that Paganini delegated that task to a famous composer rather than composing his own piece like he would normally do for violin and guitar. But he was obviously an admirer of Berlioz. This is what he said to him in French: J'ai un alto merveilleux, un instrument admirable de Stradivarius, et je voudrais en jouer en public, mais je n'ai pas de musique. Voulez-vous écrire un solo d'alto? Je n'ai confiance qu'en vous pour ce travail. So, as we said, Paganini commissioned a work rather than compose his own work for his Stradivarius viola. Berlioz began by writing a solo for viola, but one which involved the orchestra in such a way as not to reduce the effectiveness of the orchestral contribution. When Paganini saw the sketch of the Allegro movement with all the rests in the viola part, he told Berlioz it would not do and that he expected to be playing continuously. They then parted with Paganini disappointed. A few years later, Paganini was in Paris again and attended a concert including the Symphonie Fantastique and Harold in Italy, conducted by Berlioz. After the concert, Paganini went to see Berlioz and told him he'd never been as touched as by Harold, then kneeled and kissed Berlioz's hand. He'd obviously re-evaluated his view and opinion of the work. From a formal point of view, the work can be regarded as a symphony. For example, it has 4 movements, the third of which is a Beethoven-esque scherzo. The solo parts never have a virtuoso style comparable to other solo concertos. The viola has its most important role in the first movement, where it introduces the Harold theme, as well as the 2 secondary themes. Throughout the work, the viola represents Harold. Who's Harold? Well, it's from Lord Byron's poem, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. And this is what inspired Hector Berlioz's work. A very unusual and unique piece indeed. Harold in Italy was first premiered on the 23rd of November 1834 with the Orchestre de la Société des Concerts du Conservatoire, with Chrétien Huron playing the viola part and Narcisse Girard conducting. Even though the second movement, March of the Pilgrims, received an encore, this performance contributed to Berlioz's decision to conduct his own music in the future. Paganini heard the work in 1838 and was overwhelmed by it. When he dragged Berlioz on the stage and knelt and kissed his hand, the audience was wildly cheering and the musicians were applauding. A few days later, testimony to the kind of generosity that Paganini was capable of, he sent Berlioz a letter of congratulations, enclosing a bank draft for 20,000 francs. So quite a fascinating story indeed. Now, I'm attending the Prom tonight on August the 10th, 2026, to listen to the Alban Berg Violin Concerto. Here's an extract from the BBC Proms website. Esa-Pekka Salonen conducts the combined orchestras of London's Royal Academy of Music and New York's Juilliard School in 3 20th century orchestral masterworks. Award-winning Norwegian violinist Vilde Frang is the soloist in Berg's heartbreaking elegy of a violin concerto with its embedded Bach chorale, dedicated to the memory of an angel. Completed in the dying days of the Second World War, Stravinsky's Symphony in 3 movements offers a cinematographic impression of the war, jagged and convulsively rhythmic. Moving from austerity to the affirmation of life, Bartók's 1943 Concerto for Orchestra responds more optimistically to war, defiant in its folk-inspired melodies and collective virtuosity. So the performers this evening will be conductor Esa-Pekka Salonen, soloist Vilde Frang on the violin, and then the Juilliard Orchestra and the Royal Academy of Music Symphony Orchestra. Let's do a quick bio of Vilde Frang. She was born on August the 19th, 1986, and she is a celebrated Norwegian classical violinist, renowned for her deep musicianship and expressive playing. She debuted with the Oslo Philharmonic at age 12 and now performs worldwide with elite orchestras, recording as an exclusive Warner Classics artist. In 2012, she was unanimously awarded the Credit Suisse Young Artist Award and made her debut with the Vienna Philharmonic under Bernard Haitink at the Lucerne Festival. And let's do a quick rundown of who the conductor is. Esa-Pekka Salonen is known as both a composer and a conductor. He was recently named creative director of the Los Angeles Philharmonic for 2026 and 2027, and creativity and innovation chair of the Philharmonie de Paris, and principal conductor of the Orchestre de Paris from 2027 to 28. He is the conductor laureate of the Philharmonia Orchestra, Los Angeles Philharmonic and the Swedish Radio Symphony Orchestra, all of which he has led as musical director or principal conductor, and formerly served as music director of the San Francisco Symphony. He is the founder of the Colburn School's Nagani conducting program, which he directs as a member of the faculty. Salonen co-founded and until 2018 served as the artistic director of the annual Baltic Sea Festival. As for the combined orchestra, these are student ensembles, so a group of young performers for tonight, no doubt. So firstly, the Royal Academy Symphony Orchestra, which is the premier student orchestra of the Royal Academy of Music in London, forms the core part of the Conservatory's orchestral training and regularly performs major symphonic works under the baton of world-renowned guest conductors. And then the Juilliard Orchestra, which is the premier and largest student performing ensemble at the Juilliard School in New York City, comprising over 350 bachelor's and master's degree music students. The orchestra performs major classical and modern works under renowned guest conductors and faculty members. So all this will come together for this prom on August the 10th, 2026. Now, I'm obviously not going to be able to record the programme, but I may be able to catch a few snippets on my mobile phone and give you a general impression of how the concert went down and my thoughts on it. It is going to put me through my paces because I'm not really that super enthusiastic about modern works of the 20th century. There are some exceptions, of course, but I've deliberately chosen this prom to challenge me intellectually a little with these pieces. Now, much as I love Stravinsky and Bartók, the main focus for me is going to be the Violin Concerto. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into who Alban Berg was, the composer. He was born in 1885 and he lived until 1935 and was an Austrian composer who wrote atonal and 12-tone compositions that remained true to late 19th century Romanticism. He composed orchestral music, including 5 orchestral songs of 1912, chamber music songs and 2 groundbreaking operas, Wozzeck of 1925 and Lulu of 1937. Encouraged by his father and older brother, Alban Berg began to compose music without the benefit of formal instruction. During this period, his output consisted of more than 100 songs and piano duets, most of which remain unpublished. In September 1904, he met Arnold Schoenberg, an event that decisively influenced his life. The death of Berg's father in 1900 had left little money for composition lessons, but Schoenberg was quick to recognise Berg's talent and accepted the young man as a non-paying pupil. They would go on to work together for the next 6 years. Berg presented his first public performance in the fall of 1907, the Piano Sonata, which was published in 1908, and was followed by 4 songs of 1909 and a string quartet of 1910, each strongly influenced by the young composer's musical gods, Gustav Mahler and Richard Wagner. Berg married Helene Nachowski, daughter of a high-ranking Austrian officer, in 1911, and the Bergs took an apartment in Vienna where he settled down to devote the remainder of his life to music. During World War I, Berg, who was always in frail health, worked in the war ministry, which delayed completion of his opera, but he did go on to complete the opera in 1921 and dedicated it to Alma Mahler, the widow of Gustav Mahler. Berg had also become an outstanding teacher of composition, and he turned his attention to chamber music. His chamber concerto for violin, piano and 13 wind instruments was written in 1925 in honour of Schoenberg's 50th birthday. With the seizure of power by the Nazis in Germany in 1933, Berg lost most of his income. Although unlike their teacher Schoenberg, Berg and his friend and colleague Anton Webern were of non-Jewish descent, they were, together with Schoenberg, regarded as representatives of degenerate art and were increasingly excluded from performances in fascist Germany. Berg's last complete work, the Violin Concerto, originated under unusual circumstances. In 1935, the American violinist Louis Krasner commissioned Berg to compose a violin concerto for him, As usual, Berg procrastinated at first, but after the death of Manon, the beautiful 18-year-old daughter of Alma Mahler, by then the wife of the architect Walter Gropius, Berg was moved to compose the work as a kind of requiem and to dedicate it to the memory of an angel, Manon. Death and the Maiden of Schubert springs to mind as well, whenever there's a young lady that dies. But it's interesting, the concerto was a requiem to her. Having found his inspiration, Berg worked at fever pitch in the seclusion of his villa in the Austrian province of Carinthia and completed his concerto in just 6 weeks. By the time the work was finally presented by Krasny in Barcelona in April 1936, it had become a requiem not only for Manon Gropius but for Berg himself as well, because by then he'd died. In mid-November 1935, Berg returned a sick man to Vienna, although his mind was completely absorbed in his desire to finish the opera Lulu. He had to be hospitalized in December with septicemia, and after a deceptive initial improvement, he died suddenly. One of the major violin concerti of the 20th century is a work of highly personal emotional content, achieved through the use of 12-tone and other resources, symbolic as well as musical. A man of strikingly attractive appearance and reserved aristocratic bearing, Berg also had a generous personality that found expression in his correspondence and among his friends. He was an outstanding teacher of composition who encouraged his pupils to undertake significant work of their own. Few honours were accorded Berg in his lifetime, however, within a few years after his death, he had become widely recognised as a composer who broke with tradition and mastered a radical technique, and yet blended old and new to create, with Schoenberg and Webern, what became known as the 20th century or Second Viennese School. With the so-called Second Viennese School of Arnold Schoenberg, Schoenberg and his students exercised a strong influence over the course of music in the 20th century. Alban Berg and Anton Webern each had an individual musical language, but nevertheless they put into practice the general principles of atonality, music without tonality or key center, and 12-note music or serialism, music based on a series of the 12 semitones or half steps of the modern scale. And it's what some have referred to as the emancipation of atonalism, or more precisely, the emancipation of dissonance. Just in the Gem Strathmore Hotel here. I don't think it's going to pick up very good quality sound because I haven't got my microphone, but anyway, it's very well situated for the Proms, which is the main reason we're here. I did go to see an Arsenal game at the Emirates, which was awesome, even though Arsenal lost 3-2, but it was only a friendly. But this is perfect for what I need to go to the Proms tomorrow night. I can either walk 5 minutes to the tube and get the South Kensington exit for the Proms, or just probably walk from here. So we're just heading up to the Proms, and it's a beautiful evening for it as well. So I'm just going to give my verdict on the performance of the Alban Berg Violin Concerto, and the two symphonies were also performed tonight. First of all, the seat that I had was Rolling Circle, door R, row 1, seat 57 to be precise, and there was nobody sitting in front of me. There was just the edge of the Rolling Circle and the bar, and then I could look down on the orchestra, so a great vantage point. The orchestra was obviously of a very high standard, as you'd expect at the Proms. They're all young people, as I mentioned, a combination of two student orchestras from the academies that came together for tonight's performance. I thought it was interesting, the huge mute that the tuba player, this huge cone that he shoved inside the tuba at one moment in, I think it was the Stravinsky, the First Symphony, which was amusing to see. And coming on to the performance of the Alban Berg, great to see a young, beautiful up-and-coming violin star with her dazzling dress and long hair, very stylish, very feminine, and very nicely played as well. And one thing that has to be said for the Alban Berg and for many of these modern works is you have to have an absolutely phenomenal memory to play these pieces by memory, because they're not melodious, they're sort of atonal modern. We're talking about a pupil of Schoenberg after all, and so the powers of memory, of playing all these pages of notes from memory with a modern work is astounding. She pulled it off well, but I would say that the Alban Berg is definitely an acquired taste. It's not my cup of tea. It's a bit too far off the spectrum of away from romantic to float my boat, and that's why I deliberately made myself go and see it, just to see if I could stretch my mind a little. I think it's fair to say that Heifetz would never touch this piece with a barge pole. Indeed, if you read Art of Exlavered's biography of Heifetz, you learn that he rejected the Violin Concerto of Schoenberg, which originally was supposed to be dedicated to him, because he just found it too far out there and unplayable and too weird. And we mustn't forget that Alban Berg was Schoenberg's pupil. So yeah, not convinced. It's not going to go down as one of my favourite pieces, but I'm still glad I went to see it. And overall, fantastic evening and a great couple of days here in London. And I've earned a reward for it as well. I've done that many violin pilgrimages to London now, from seeing the houses where Mozart lived to going and checking out the Bartók sites. And by the way, the last symphony was a huge work by Bartók. I've done that many trips down here that I've actually earned myself platinum membership from Club Avanti on the train, which means that I have a complimentary entrance into the first class lounge in Euston Station tomorrow, and so I can go down there and treat myself to some goodies before I catch my train home. And also I have a discount code for a first class ticket, so I guess that means that I can get a standard class and upgrade to first for free. So those are the perks of chasing around for violin stuff. So I'm thinking I'm going to need to give myself a break from coming down here to London. All being well, I'm going to be in Spain next month in September, chasing decorated Stradivarius instruments and going to the birthplace of Sarasate as well, if I can pull that off. So I'm thinking maybe I'll come back down to London in December. I still have a few blue plaques to check out, so I'll leave you a little glimpse of some of the sightseeing I was able to do. So I sort of doubled up as a bit of a tourist on this trip myself, and this great city of London has so much to offer and never ceases to amaze me whenever I'm down here. So the sound quality might not have been fantastic just here because I went and forgot my microphone, but I still wanted to make this recording whilst all these events are fresh in my mind. So I'll leave you with this final segment of the video. And what I'm going to do now is go and explore some sites in London that I've been meaning to see for a while, plus at least one slightly unusual site as well. So the weather is about 30 degrees. Let's get out there. It's a very, very...